Another edition of Beat the Closing Number presented by TheLines.com and Bet365 Sportsbook. I'm Eli Hershkovich, joined by Brett Gibbons, fellow contributor to TheLines.com, college football guru. Also, David Woodley, Onyx at Playmaker David, four-time WSOP champ, and also starting up an unnamed company that maybe he'll tease later on in the show. But first and foremost, Brett, Ohio State not competing in conference championship weekend. Those are the games we're going to preview, 6 of them. How you feeling after Ohio State lost its 4th in a row to Michigan? All hail.
How do you think I should be feeling right now? It was absolutely atrocious. Terrible coaching. Just all around bad. I mean, field goal kicker misses a couple of field goals. Even a 16-13 win, if he hits both of those, is still not feeling very great in your own backyard. I don't know if Ryan Day took the play calling from Chip Kelly or so. That was such a Ryan Day called game. That was not a Chip Kelly called game. I don't care what anybody says, but yeah, it's pretty bleak, which, 125 other programs nationally saying you're sitting at 10-2 and almost a shoo-in to the college football playoff with a chance of the national. I would say still a good chance at the national championship. Why are you feeling so badly? That's college football, man. You don't beat your rivals. It's the only thing that matters in Columbus.
David, when Brett said he would be still in the fire Ryan Day camp if Ohio State won the national championship, I'm way beyond being a fan at this point, so that kind of took me by surprise. What about you?
I mean, I get that he's unlikable Day and all that, and I get this is like a total meltdown, but I mean, if they turn around and win, they have to win what, like 3? I think it's no, they what 4? They'd have to win 4 games to win the title, right? Yeah. I don't know, man. Like, if they win the inaugural 12-team playoff, if they win, 4, have to win 4 games after, like getting embarrassed. I mean, I don't know how you could fire them. I mean, winning the Natty, it feels like is kind of the goal, especially these days with the playoff, right? I mean, I think the playoff kind of makes it like all or nothing. I think that's one of the criticisms of the national title or with the playoffs, right? It was like, at least in the past, under the BCS era or whatever, like you felt good about winning the Fiesta Bowl or finishing 5th, but like, now you have one winner and like 11 teams that felt like they left it out there. So I don't know. If they win it, we'll follow back up on this and see how strong you are on it. But I mean, I guess hell, if they brought like Urban Meyer back, I mean, I guess you would probably ditch him either way. But I don't know. It's like be careful what you wish for in some cases.
I'm an Oklahoma
fan.
Mike
I'm an Oklahoma
that's
fan.
where we're going.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm an Oklahoma guy, and like I didn't like the Venables hire then, and I don't like it now. So I mean, it's. You're on top for a long time, but it goes quick. And I grew up a Nebraska fan too, and you kind of feel like you're going to be up here all the time, and it goes quick. And I know NIL money and all that like makes a big difference, but man, these coaches, it can always be worse. So
I'm with you on that front, but without further ado, let's get into the action this weekend. 6 conference championship games, starting off with the AAC on Friday, 8 p.m. Eastern Time kickoff between Tulane and Army. Tulane, a 4.5-point favorite, total of 45.5. Brett, bet on this game or just a take on potential side?
I'm still going to sit and watch to see where this kind of levels out at. I already kind of, missed the best number if you're looking at it. Look, first and foremost, it's going to be cold in West Point, New York, guys, and this is a team from New Orleans that these seniors on this team haven't really played anything like it. A lot of them, of course, coming over from Troy, which isn't exactly much cooler. The closest I could find in terms of temperature from this team for the last 3 or 4 years or so was last year's bowl game in Annapolis, where it was 48 degrees. However, no wind, no snow to really impede them there. The total did come down, though, from 48.5. I think that's more about the teams themselves rather than the conditions they're going to be playing in. I do have to get a hat tip. Credit where credit is due here. Brad Power is actually the one that pulled this up. John Summerall has faced option teams 3 times in his coaching career. That's Army twice and Navy this past year. His defense gave up a combined 9 points, fellas. Combined. He shut Navy out earlier this year, 35-0, held him to 113 total yards. I know Blake Horvath did kind of suffer an injury, a little bit banged up in that game, in and out. But look, they still shut that option attack down. These guys are just really, really well coached in the option. If you go back and look at these defensive linemen, they know how to play both the pitch and the keep, and they have guys swarming the dive. It's just a really, really good scheme to be able to shut down these option defenses. On the other side, to beat Tulane, you're probably going to have to score 30+. I don't think even Army's defense is going to hold them under 27 or so. Army's, They played one defense ranked in the top 50 in points per drive this year, that being Notre Dame, and I'm just not going to even compare Tulane and Notre Dame. They're not the same football team. They did play 6 opponents, 95th or worse in that metric, 8 opponents, 80th or worse. And then to talk about Mikey Stadium, a lot of people are going to say, well, they're playing at home, I'm going to give them the bump. I'm really not. They have less than a 57% win rate at home against FBS opponents, so I'm not really sure that home field advantage is all that strong, besides the fact that it's going to be really cold in New York there. Unranked teams, by the way, over ranked teams in the 20s, they win about 70% of the time. So this is Tulane with the points for me.
So you think this number is potentially a little too short?
Too short. Well, yeah, I would take the points with Tulane. Yeah, or lay the points. Pardon me.
Okay, David, what about you? Anything with the spread or total or just a pass?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't dive as deep into it as he did in terms of like I didn't like them versus the option. I mean, I know they have a good run defense, and like I just kind of gravitated there right away, right? When you have a one-dimensional team, which Army is, that works when you're playing like bad opponents and stuff. But like Tulane's a solid little team there, and they should be able to contain them on the ground. Tulane is balanced. I mean, like they're not world beaters by any means, but I think on paper, on everything else, they're the much better team. Like they can, like one team can score in many ways, like the other team can't. So it just feels like everything kind of has to fall for Army for it to sort of break right for them. And I think having it at home is obviously beneficial, and it being a little chilly is helps them a little bit, but it's not. We're not talking about something where it is snowing or sleeting, and I mean, last I checked, it seemed it's gonna be mild, right? It's gonna be chilly. It's gonna bother these players, but I think they can play in it. Like I think when you're in those 20s to 40s, anecdotally, I mean, humans can survive it. Like it bothers you a little bit and stuff. I think it's different if it's like in the teens or single digits, right? And then all of a sudden you can't grip the football, you can't throw it, like guys are dropping it. So I don't view that as a huge thing. I actually love the under in this game. I actually kind of like the alternates in it as well. Like I'll be looking at Tulane, like if you can get them like 10, 12, 13, because I just see this as a scenario where they win like 27-10 or 24-7 or something like that. So love Tulane.
Yeah, no, definitely worth a look over at Bet365. And if you use the Bet365 early payout offer, you're a winner if your team goes up by 17 or more points with the instant payout offer on college football straight bets and parlay selections that are marked as a winner, available for all users. Remember that first-time customers can use promo code THELINES, one word, THE LINES, and receive $200 in bonus bets with your first $5 wager as well. So the early payout offer available to all customers, but that $200 bonus bet, up to $200 in bonus bets with your first $5 wager for first-time customers only. So let's get into the second matchup on Friday, the Mountain West Championship game at Boise State. The Broncos favored by 4 points against UNLV, total of 57.5. You go back to the first meeting between these two teams on October 25th on, I think, a Friday night as well. Boise State was, I think, closed right around 4.5. So very similar point spread. The market adjusting from that game where Boise State pulled away with a 5-point win on a touchdown on their, I think, their final or second to last possession, but benefiting from a turnover right before half from UNLV. Also fourth down variance, going 4 for 4 on those late down attempts. But UNLV outgained Boise State in that game by over 1 yard per play, 1.4 yards per play to be exact. And I was talking to Brett about this before we got into the start of the podcast. David, UNLV ranks 21st in adjusted line yards allowed. So even if you go back to the injury that Genty suffered in that game, maybe an outside shot, or definitely an outside shot, but slim chance of having any shot to win the Heisman at this point. But I still think UNLV's run defense is set up to create havoc literally at the line of scrimmage, despite the fact that maybe the numbers in his first performance against UNLV were a little bit subjective just because he suffered the injury early on in that game. I think just 3.9 yards per carry overall for Genty in his first meeting against the Rebels. So any stronger bet for you, maybe pre-flop with the traditional spread, or you did have the total, the underlook in Tulane and Army, but anything here point spread wise for UNLV Boise?
Yeah, it's I think it's gonna be a close game. I actually caught a good chunk of that first game. I have too many friends that went to UNLV, and I've had to hear about them all year, and like hear about this miraculous run and all that. I think it's close. I think four is too much. So I'm taking UNLV on that one. That first game was good, and like they are able to stop. They're able to stop the run, and I don't think he's in the Heisman race. I mean, he for him to kind of get back in it, I don't know what you have to do. But if he does it, like we'll know it, and I don't see that happen. I mean, you're talking what like maybe 300 all-purpose yards, like 5 touchdowns. I don't see UNLV doing that. He's also launching a crypto like project like this week or something, which is like I don't know. I mean, not that I'm building that into the analysis or whatever, but it's just like this is weird. I mean, you're playing like the biggest game of your life, and yeah, I guess embrace the hustle. No, I like UNLV, and as much as home field advantage is going to get talk about Boise and all that, like it should be noted, like UNLV is like undefeated on the road this year, and that's pretty impressive for any college team, and especially someone like them. And UNLV has been, they've kind of faced adversity all year, right? With like losing that quarterback early on, and everything there. So I think a combo of like them being able to stop the run, and this quarterback and just the story. I think they keep it close. I think they lose a very close one, but I also think they have a puncher's chance, and I personally, I am rooting for them to win because as much as I kind of like that program and stuff, it would be pretty funny to see them make the 12-team playoff because like come on, like they should not be in the playoff. Like them being in that playoff kind of defeats a lot of the purpose because they will be drawing completely dead in my opinion. So I'm taking UNLV +4. I don't have a strong opinion on the total. I think it's kind of right where it should be. So I mean, you kind of want to take the under, but I don't know. That could be a crazy shootout as well.
Yeah, I'm with you on the +4. I'll have a write-up over at thelines.com. Pretty much a consensus price in the market, but you can grab that -110 over at Bet365 as we record this here on Thursday, December 5th, a day ahead of the game, Mountain West Conference Championship. Brett, are you with us? So we're going to make it 3 for 3 on the Rebels?
It sure seems to be the sharp side at least. It's down from 5.5, which you're not missing a whole lot of percentage points by still getting it at 4 as long as you're getting it north of 3. I do want to point out, though, that UNLV did catch some teams at advantageous positions this year. They got Houston in the first game of the year when that team was just absolutely awful. They're much improved. Kansas, right before the bye week. Yeah. They were also playing poorly and turning the ball over. Syracuse, by the way, was in the middle of a 3-game road stretch. The first time I think that they traveled like west of Tennessee or something, like 50 years. That was their only non-conference one. So they're, of course, focused on other things, and Syracuse was able to pull out the win there. But the rest of the schedule is pretty bad. The next best foe I can see on here is Fresno State. I haven't ranked 82. While Ashton Genty takes the spotlight for Boise, their defense has actually been really good. It's really solid down to down. They do give up explosive plays, and well, fortunately for UNLV, they have Ricky White and Hajj Malik Williams that are both capable of explosive plays, as is really any running back that toasts the ball in there. And the one thing I want to point out about playing really well on the road, that was a good point. They've scored fewer points on the road. Of course, you have to look at opponents that they're playing here. But look, their defense is giving up about a field goal less when they play on the road, which, like, if your defense is traveling like that, I don't care who you're playing, you're in a pretty good position. So, yeah, it seems like UNLV is the correct side here. I think a field goal is probably about right for how this finishes.
So you're grabbing the +4, or is it just a lean with the
I'm
side?
I'm agreeing with your guys' +4. Let's put it that way. I don't have any actual U.S. currency on this.
Okay, fair enough. What do you make of the quarterback situation? Just change up mid-year. One sportsbook out there trying to sponsor before the switch happened. Right, exactly. Brett, what's your take? Just because you follow college football closer than I do, at least.
I knew what was coming up. I knew
exactly.
I knew that Hajj Malik Williams was. I mean, UNLV took some people were putting him down like a field goal, almost a touchdown. Degrade in their point spread and their power rating, and Hajj Malik Williams has always been, in my opinion, a 1B probably headed in, and there didn't seem to be any panic. There almost seemed to be celebration from the team around when Sluka was finally like, "Hey guys, I'm out of here." You can tell he's never really in it, and they know what their quarterback was. Hajj Malik Williams is terrific, and I think the team was overcorrected for like a week, and then we saw them take it to Fresno State, and everyone was like, "Never mind, they're the same, if not maybe a little bit better."
Yeah, you brought up explosive plays allowed. You mentioned UNLV has been stout in limiting those. I think UNLV had two more, 6-4 in explosive plays the last time these two teams linked up, and a few of those, or a handful of them, came on third down. So worth noting with that too. And yeah, I think we're all in agreement UNLV's run defense is up to the task against Genty, or at least not allowing 300 total yards from scrimmage, to your point, David. That can get him back in the Heisman race, but very, very, very unlikely. Definitely not worth any sort of currency on that market. It is Travis Hunter times a million at this point, and the market reflects that. Over to the Big 12, Arizona State 2-point favorite against Iowa State, total of 49.5. David, you said you're a Cyclone fan. Are you a Cyclone alum?
No, my dad is. So like I'm an Oklahoma alum, but I grew up in Nebraska of all places, so we liked a lot of teams. But no, he's Iowa State alum, and I was just always growing up watching them a lot, and there's like a lot of lean years there. So I'm a big Matt Campbell believer and all that, and it's nice. I mean what they're doing this year. It's like I think the first 10-win season they've ever had. It's like for like their second conference championship game they've ever been in. I mean it's kind of a historical run, and I mean it's a good team. I've watched a lot of their games. I think they're the better team in this game. I think didn't it open like they were like a 1-point favorite or something, and it quickly moved. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I mean, I guess all the sharp money's going on Arizona State, and I kind of get it. But having watched these games, I mean, they shouldn't have lost that Tech game. That Tech game was kind of a choke job, and then they deserved to lose that Kansas game. I mean, Daniel's brother is just. But in all these other games, like they've really done a very good job of kind of like dominating where they need to, like dominating, between the hashes. Like they just look like the better team. But for some reason, they just like let these teams like stay in it. I mean, that Utah game is like a perfect example. I mean, Utah's not a good team, but Iowa State should have won that game by like 17, 21 points. But they somehow managed to give up like a punt block for a touchdown, like interception for a touchdown, all this stuff that like just shouldn't have happened. And I'm not saying like trust me, there's like a lot of skill in like not turning the ball over, but there's just some like really weird things that they need to clean up, and it almost kind of cost them in that K-State game as well. I mean, there's just all these like kind of frustrating moments there. So I mean, Iowa State always has the ability to implode and self-implode. I think they're the better. I just think they're the better team here. I mean, they got some like really good wide receivers that nobody's talking about. That running game's like solid enough, and that defense, the defense is like really really disciplined. I mean, it's not like the sexiest defense to watch ever, but I still think they're ranked number one in the Big 12. Even after kind of like a couple of the letdowns the past couple of weeks. And I think they'll be fine. Like the run defense is a bit worrisome. But I think it opened where it should have been. I mean, I think this should have been them as a slight favorite or a pick 'em, and I still kind of have them biases aside. I still kind of have it as a pick 'em. So I mean, if you're giving me, what do you show? I've been seeing like 2.5 most of the week. Is that what it's still at? Yeah,
Yeah, I think it got as high as 2, but at Bet365, a flat 2.
Okay, so it came back a little bit. No, give me the 2, and I'm really excited for the game. I mean, it's. The other thing I will mention too is like, and I think this is kind of important as well, and like them kind of like blowing these leads and like having their back against the wall late, like needing Rocco to lead like game-winning drives. Like I think it is notable, right, that when you put these players through these situations where it's like you have to execute on this 2-minute drive to win the game, otherwise your season's over. I think it does help you a bit in these conference championship games, and I feel like they've been through it a bit more than Arizona State, so maybe a slight nod to the experience factor there as well. But I'm super excited to watch this game.
Quick follow-up for me, and more just a general principle question. When a novice bettor hears, okay, you have an edge towards X team and their plus money, and it's essentially a dead number. Now, you could argue 2 points. I mean, it's a dead number, NFL, college football. So where is your decision making at when you're taking the 2 points? Variance in play for sure. I'm on your side with that of the equation, but how do you go about that thought process?
Well, I mean, honestly, like I prefer the money line at this point, on it. But like, again, like you come on these shows and start. I think like it's good to focus on like the two main markets, right? Like sides and totals. Like we could sit here all day on
Okay,
like
so you would take the
props.
money line.
Oh yeah, I would take the money line. But even with two, I was thinking about there was like a lot of controversy with some guy on another show talking about how like two is a key number in the NFL, and it's not. Like it's fallen to like a
Right.
few times a year. The Rob Pizzola was on the other side of it being like two is not a key number, and like you even saying this is ridiculous. So anyways, you guys can search that up yourself. So I don't think it is a key number. I mean, in college, like I don't know though. I mean, in college, could it be a little bit? I mean, with these funky
The
overtime
overtime
rules, what we saw,
makes it interesting.
yeah, like you have to go for two, and it's kind of ridiculous. I mean, it sounds so stupid, and I know it's like so rare, but like when these games go to overtime in college, with the way these rules are, I mean, you only got to go 25 yards. I mean, these things can go second overtime, third overtime, because I think on the second overtime you have to go for two, and then the third overtime it just starts 2 point, 2 point, 2 points. So if you get to the third overtime, you're playing with house money there, and even that second overtime, a lot of teams win by two because they get that 2 point conversion, and then I don't know, like yeah, two can hit two if it's like a field goal game or 1 point game. And I don't know, like in these conference champion, maybe I'm talking myself into liking the points more than the money line, but I like the money line in this. But I don't know. I'll leave it to you guys. You guys are more the experts on it, but I am curious if like two actually holds a little bit more value in college than it does the NFL. To me, it
Well,
just feels that like first glance it would. But not
look
by
at,
much.
and I was on the wrong side of this on Monday Night Football, but Browns were down two to Denver. And that's not to say that it is a key number because it's not, but with variance in mind, it can always happen. So you want to take the points. You want to your point about overtime, Brett, where do you side on this end of the equation? And do you have a bet on this game?
I do, and actually, I'll just jump right to what that is. And I do like the points with Iowa State here. So I guess this is a positive of conference realignment, right? Like we're getting a first-time matchup, a couple of teams that are never in this, and they're playing for a direct spot in the college football playoff. Maybe a bye. If UNLV wins, definitely a bye. My biggest issue here with Arizona State is they lost Jordan Tyson, their top receiver. And when I say top receiver, I mean the receiver, because their next leading receiver on the team, Cam Scadaboo, which I'll talk about him in a minute here. But but Tyson had surgery. He's out. He's going to return to the team next year and probably be a stud. He actually led all of college football in November in receiving. So just keep that in mind, that injury, in my opinion, does matter here. Now, Scadaboo's the lone go-to guy on a down-to-down basis, right? Their quarterback, Sam Levitt, he's actually been really strong. They plucked him from Michigan State. Didn't, not a lot of expectation on him, steps up, and he plays really well this year. But what happens when you take away that number one, especially when you hit your stride in November, then you lose that go-to guy. Now, all of a sudden, your leading receiver is a running back. Your second leading receiver is a tight end, right? And like now you got to go to 3 or 4 to find your next receiver. Iowa State, on the other hand, boy, they got plenty of weapons. They have 2,000-yard receivers, Jalen Noel, Jaden Higgins, just absolute dominant tandem. And I haven't even talked about the North Dakota State transfer that they have there that hasn't really gotten going this year because there hasn't been the opportunity for them since they've got two studs. Plus, they've got Abu Sama. I mean, still a strong running back. Rocco Beck, though, the one thing I do have to point out, he's been a little bit underwhelming, in my opinion, based on the precedent that he set last year, right? I expected him to be really, really strong this year, and he's been good, but nothing special, I don't think. Arizona State, of course, they're going to get the nod on defense. I do think this is a great spot, though, to fade Arizona State, because I think they're getting a little bit of a bump in rating from their blowout of Arizona. Let's be clear, guys. I don't care if that's a rivalry. Arizona quit. Right, like there's been rumblings about Fafita hitting the portal, which his dad came out and said, no, that's not true. But if it does ring true, maybe his heart wasn't in the game. It's just Arizona did not play that game with any sort of urgency whatsoever, and they got their doors blown off. So I don't know if that's necessarily a data point I want to use when assessing Arizona State. So the bottom line, Iowa State, they have more weapons. I think their defenses are pretty comparable on a down-to-down basis. Scadaboo's going to be able to run, no doubt about that. But when the game comes down to it, Levitt's going to have to find a guy to go to, and can he find that go-to guy? Maybe Scadaboo can do it on his own. If he does, that'd be amazing. He deserves some Heisman votes at the very least if he does win this game on the back of his shoulders. But there's just more to like with Iowa State, so I'm going to take them with the plus number.
One more thing for you. Do you think the market is just, and I understand your point about Arizona State having that key offensive injury, but just with Iowa State on both sides of the ball, running and defending the run, 99th in rushing success rate, 84th in rushing success rate allowed. So what if this game does turn into a negative game script and conversely a positive game script for the Sun Devils?
Well, Iowa State can still throw the ball better, and I trust them to be able to do that. So I do, like, if you had to give me a team that was in a negative game script that I like better, I like Iowa State in the negative game script better. Now, that said, if Scadaboo's running for 8.5 a carry and finishes with 122 and they salt away the time and, maybe has like almost 200 all-purpose yards and 3 touchdowns, yeah, I mean, Arizona State very well could win this game. If that's the case, go ahead and take under 49.5 as well. There's just more to like for Iowa State with me. And if you're looking at the EPA numbers and success rate numbers, their defenses are fairly comparable, of course, in different areas, but the net of it all is kind of similar.
I think the negative, I mean, it sounds like ridiculous. You're like, they actually should. The negative game script helps them. But actually, when you've seen Iowa State, like, I think at their best is like when they're playing up-tempo, aggressive, passing the ball a bit. I know that's not like unique to them or a very unique take at all, but I think they're fine there. I think they're more than comfortable doing it. And yeah, the run defense has been a bit of an issue, but he'll have them ready. I mean, it's yeah. I mean, again, if they get down 17 points, like they're in deep crap. But down 7 and even like 10, right, in early third quarter and stuff. I don't think it's like going to be a huge thing that affects them. And but on like the flip side, I think this is a game too where I do think if they get Arizona State down 10, I think that I'm not super impressed with Arizona State's passing game coming into this game. And you had mentioned it, right? Losing like the one kind of, I don't want to say he's like their only receiver, but it kind of is, right? And like now you've kind of limited it to like one playmaker who is a very good running back and a good running back. But again, like running backs can only do so much from the receiving game, right? Like, if they, if they're down 10, 8 minutes in the fourth quarter, 5 minutes in the fourth quarter, like is the running back is the guy that you can count on getting like big chunk plays? Like I don't think so. I don't think he is. So,
or if there's 2.5 minutes in the game and you're down a score, and you then take the ball out of his hands, and it has to be a Sam Levitt finding the next best guy through the air. I guess you could keep handing it Scadaboo, but that's a difficult proposition that I would not want to find myself in if I was Arizona State or a backer of Arizona State.
David, what's your dad going to do if Iowa State comes out on top here?
I mean, listen, they're retired. I mean, they're already talking about like going to all these like bowl games and stuff like that, like go to the Nebraska one and try to go to the Iowa State one. I mean, they'll definitely go to that Iowa State one. I mean, it'll be really interesting to see where that ends up, right? They're either gonna so like the playoffs so weird, man. Like they're either gonna end up with a road game or they're gonna get a first round bye, and like there's no in between. And because I think that's the case, right? Because if it like doesn't matter if they win the conference, they don't get a home game, right? Yeah, I mean they won't be top. They'll be like the 11 seed or 10 or 12.
Right.
They'll go. My dad will definitely go. I mean, he'll go with his roommates. I mean, they're all pretty pumped. So I mean, it'd be a bummer to see them do this. And like Campbell in those years there, he's always done like really well, but they've always kind of like choked, when they had a chance to like go that next step. And I think like this is the year. I think this is the year they get it done. And like, listen, them making the playoffs would be huge for the program. Them like somehow getting a first round bye if UNLV pulls it off, like even bigger. So now I'm gonna be watching it, texting with him quite a bit as well. But they want to go to the Nebraska bowl game too. So like they'll be traveling around.
Well, if you have no stake on this game and you're watching or listening, at the very least, cheer on David's dad. That's what we've learned from this conversation. Over to the SEC championship game. Texas, a 2.5-point favorite after opening around 1.5, depending on the book, against Georgia. Rematch from their first meeting where Texas fell behind 23-zip, came back to make it a bit of a game as around a 4-point favorite, I believe. Brett, you can correct me if I'm wrong there, but Georgia's still winning by double digits. Total of 49.5 here. The market likes Texas in a rematch. Brett, do you?
Well, I do have to address the fact that I took over in the Texas A&M game last time I was on here, and that's pretty hard to get home when A&M does not score an offensive point. So, we're all wrong on here from time to time, but saying
You
that
had Notre
A&M
Dame, though.
I did have Notre Dame, but to say that Texas A&M's offense was going to be able to score on Texas defense, I don't think I've ever been more wrong, because that was just not the case. But look, Texas opened as a 1.5-point favorite. It's now at 2.5. I think I saw 3, maybe pop for a second. If it does hit 3, it's not staying there. There's going to be an absolute floodgate of money coming in on Georgia for sure. One thing that I do like to talk about, injuries that matter in this one, left tackle Kelvin Banks, All-American. He did roll his ankle up on week 14. He probably should play. Probably going to be spatted on that ankle pretty good, but that is something that I am watching. And then this is a weird one. Georgia's starting corner, Julian Humphrey, just hit the portal. Just SEC championship game, opportunity to play for national champion. Nah, I'm out of here. Not sure what that's about. I know the Georgia locker room has been a mess, but guys transferring when they're in the SEC championship, I don't know about that. Carson Beck, though, I have talked about his splits on the road versus at home. He's much worse on the road than he is at home. This is more a home game, of course, happening in Atlanta. But despite that dominant win in Austin, Beck was atrocious against this Texas defense. Do you trust a quarterback to play like that twice and win the game twice? I don't. I like my quarterback to at least be mistake-free, and he was very far. I think he had like a $150 pass in that game or something, and a few picks. The last matchup, Texas just looked flat-out shell-shocked. Georgia was actually sending pressure. Like, they weren't just heads-up 4 guys in a pass rush. They were blitzing them, getting home, and they're giving them different looks. But, look, Texas only gave up the 1 touchdown in the second half against Georgia's offense. So there's a flash fry there from, like, the end of the first to, like, the halftime, and then that was kind of the end of that right there. Since then, they gave up 24 points to Vandy, which Vandy's been doing this against good defense. Diego Pavia, Thanos pretty much. And Texas was pretty beat up after that Georgia game. I'm tossing out the Florida result. DJ Lagway got hurt. That's not a data point for me. But then they gave up 10 points to Arkansas, 7 offensive points to Kentucky, and 0 offensive points to A&M. I don't care how good those offenses are. That's an impressive amount there, holding them to basically peanuts. I still question if the Texas offense can do anything against the Georgia defense. One of those 2 touchdowns last time came on a short field, as a 9-yard field that they scored on a shocker here, turnover. By the way, Texas has forced 13 turnovers in the last 5 games. I'm just keep an eye on that. They're going to be able to get the football back. I don't have a bet here just because I think it's going to be interesting, but this is something where like a unstoppable force meets an immovable object in terms of these 2 defenses.
David, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, at first glance, I mean, it kind of like screams Texas, but I started like diving in a bit more, and I started liking it less and less and less. And listen, I'm an Oklahoma alum, so for me to like Texas in anything is difficult to stomach to begin with. I was definitely on the wrong side in that first game, man. That was a mess. I think Georgia caught them by surprise that first game, to be honest, just by like all out blitzing them. I think both quarterbacks had lost fumbles. I think Ewers had a couple. Like, they got sacked over a half dozen times or something. I mean, they were dead, and then they kind of came back there for a minute as well. I remember watching them be like, oh, maybe we're alive, and it's like, no, we're dead. And then like recent trends, everything kind of points to Texas as well, right? Like, Georgia Tech should have beat Georgia. Let's be honest there, or if not should have. I mean, that just would have been just a terrible, terrible loss. So I mean, everything kind of seems to be trending Texas, and like Texas should win this and win it easily. But you start diving in more and more, and I'm not like the biggest like trends guy in the world, but like Kirby Smart is like 8-4 as an underdog at Georgia and stuff like that. So I think you can't. I don't think you can discount, especially for college kids. You can't really discount this like motivational factor, right? Like, hey, like we're Georgia, like we've been like top of the world for like several years. Like we've earned our spot here. Georgia's still legitimately a top 6-7 team in my eyes, right? Like they're not terrible. Like, have they struggled? Yes. Is Carson Beck leaves some to be desired? Like, yes. It just, man, it feels like it's going to be. What's the total on this right now that you're showing?
49 and a half.
49. Yeah, I like the under in it. I like the under in it. I think both defenses are like pretty good. I think that you're going to see them both come out a little more conservative than last time because like there were like a million turnovers. Again, like it's easier to protect against fumbles. Fumbles can be a little more fluke. I mean, Texas knows what they have to do this time, which is actually like get the ball out quicker and do a little bit better job blocking. but Beck had I think 3 interceptions there as well. So I mean, I think both teams are going to come out a little more passive. They're going to focus on defense and ball control, and so my favorite bet on this actually is under. I was actually worried it was going to go down a bit more, so I love the under in it. Gun to head, which side do I like more? Like Texas, but I don't think I'm going to bet it. I think I'm just kind of I'm going to enjoy it, and it just it feels like a game, and it feels like a lot of the public is just going on Texas just because they are the flashy team. They're clearly one of the best 2 teams in football. Yeah, they had the hiccup against Georgia, but that loss did feel really fluky. Man, they did look good against A&M. That was such a weird game though, because if Texas would have failed to cover that would have been so ridiculous because Texas absolutely outplayed them and just kept letting them back in and back in. And at no point did you ever think A&M was going to win that, but a lot of that game, you're like, dude, they're going to backdoor cover this, and this is going to be a miserable loss. So give me Texas by a smidge, but love the under.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because just a thought exercise for everyone here. What happens if Texas doesn't turn the ball over twice in plus territory and it's a 31-7 or 31-0 game? What is the spread?
I mean,
probably hits 3.
Yeah.
3.5 maybe even. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of...
And they outplayed A&M to beat them 31-0, 31-7. But they turned the ball over carelessly in plus territory 2 times. It's just interesting because that doesn't change the composition of Texas in this game. So maybe lean the 2.5.
That's kind of my thinking there. But then I also give Georgia's been here before. They have the coach has been here before. They have a better. I'm not a big Sark guy. I don't they have the better coaching staff. I think Texas by far has the better talent. But in these type of games, and it's a rematch. I mean, I think it's easy for me to sit here and be like, oh, Texas is going to make adjustments, yada yada yada. But Georgia's going to make adjustments there too. I mean, that, as much as I like to think that I was still alive in that game, it was because Georgia was messing around, having Beck was throwing 3 interceptions or whatever. Georgia could have, and Georgia still won that game, I think by 2 touch 15 or 16 points. It wasn't they let them back in all the way. So I mean, it's very easy to sit here and be like, Texas has learned their lesson, but Georgia's going to make some adjustments there too. But again, I lean the 2.5, but it's going to be a good game. I mean, it's going to be a really fun one. That's going to be a really fun one to watch. I think it's in my opinion probably the best. I think it's going to be the best game of the bunch, right? At least when you combine what's at stake and the teams playing, and both these teams. I think they're both top 4 or 5 in odds to actually win the whole thing as well. So I mean, this is a massive game for them.
Yeah, looking at the odds to win, or I'll pull that up here in a second, but I wanted to get back to something you said about Kirby Smart covering a dominant ATS record. I think 26 and 15 ATS versus ranked opponents in his career. So been there before, done that, to your point. Georgia, or conversely, on the flip side, failing to cover against Georgia Tech, just barely hanging on, 3-9 ATS this season. But you maybe take that with a grain of salt with the market overvaluing them. And again, not a trends guy either, but just in terms of Smart being here before in this moment, I'm not a Steve Sarkisian guy. So I'm with you from the standpoint that maybe you trust Kirby Smart and this Georgia coaching staff over Sark and Texas. What about the quarterback? Brett, you briefly touched on Carson Beck. Quinn Ewers versus Carson Beck. Who do you trust more?
Well, it depends which Carson Beck shows up, because you have a Carson Beck that throws for 297, 5-0, and Carson Beck in the second half of Alabama, that ends with almost 500 yards and 3 touchdowns despite throwing those early picks. Or you get the Carson Beck we got against Texas last time. Or you get the Carson Beck that we have against Ole Miss. And, you can kind of compare those defenses and say, well, I kind of wonder what the factor might be. It's also playing away from home. But right now, probably Quinn Ewers. I might regret that, because now we're going to have a Carson Beck game where he just absolutely goes nuclear. But I probably trust, how about this? I trust the whole that you get of Quinn Ewers and Arch Manning together, because I can do that. They do interchange them when need be. I mean, their first touchdown scored was Arch. I trust that whole of 2 players more than I trust Carson Beck in almost any given situation.
On the injury front, too, to keep in mind, Kirby Smart coming out, I think as we're recording this on Thursday, Trevor Etienne, who missed Georgia's last 3 games with the rib injury, should be able to play, it seems like, against Texas here, and he's listed
That's
questionable on the injury report as of Wednesday. So worth noting there, too. I mean, running backs to the point spread in general, not worth a lot, but
in college, more. In college, definitely more.
They trust him.
I have to throw that out.
Okay.
Yeah,
David, what were you going to say?
I was going to say, like, with all the questions at back and the turnovers and stuff, I think having the running back is huge, especially like in the red zone and stuff. Like when you have that running back that can like get in the end zone, it's huge. And I know it doesn't affect the point spread a whole lot. But I think there are certain games where it does, and I think you're actually, not to get too off topic here, I think you're actually seeing it in the NFL this year. And like, yeah, a lot has been made about Barkley and like these teams that gave up these guys are terrible. I'm like, they were gonna be terrible anyways, right? Like the Raiders would be garbage, like the Giants were gonna be a mess. All this, but I think if you even look beyond like some of those guys, I think you look at these teams, like field goals are way up and all this stuff in the NFL. Running back is like so much more important these days, at least in the NFL. Just getting that ball in the end zone, like defenses are getting smarter, all that stuff. I mean, I think you can. I mean, how many points do you think like Christian? I know that they're not worth a whole lot, but like Christian McCarthy, I think is like, or McCarthy, how do you say his name? For the Niners, he might
McCaffrey, yeah.
McCarthy, sorry. McCaffrey
must be having dreams about Mike McCarthy.
He's ruined. Yeah, he's like ruined my one of my best ball teams, unthankfully. But he's like, look how important he is for the Niners to actually get the ball in the end zone, right? Like he's like the one guy where they would get in the end zone. Like he's the one you always felt good about scoring. Otherwise, you put on Brock Purdy's shoulders, and like he's got to find one of his receivers, and it's just not made for it. I kind of view George as the same thing, right? Like Beck isn't this guy that you just feel great about if it's second and goal from the 7 or third and goal from the 4, but like you get that running back and it changes everything. It changes how the defense does. So getting him back is absolutely huge in my eyes, and I think that's where games are won and lost is the teams that can turnovers number one, but it's like the teams that can actually like convert inside the 10 and get touchdowns instead of field goals. And again, it's just everything points to Texas, but the more you talk, I'm just like, this is gonna be like I'm gonna be so wrong on this. So
so maybe a live bet if you get either team above a possession, above a touchdown.
I've had bad luck with that. I respect people that do that, but anytime I've tried that, it's gone pear-shaped. And then you find yourself where you're like, oh, well, like now, like surely they'll cover the 9.5 and they'll cover 50. And like, I don't do that, but it's a good angle for people that do. So I respect that thought.
Just going back to the notion of you saying you think this could play out as the best game of the weekend. So tight game, therefore a one possession kind of game. That was my thought process.
No, of course. And I honestly, I'd probably do it. I'm just too many bad memories, like floating back, and a couple of them recent, because I actually did that in the first game too. I was just like, Texas is going to come back. They'll come back. And I don't think I won a single bet on that one, because I still thought that game was going to be a one possession game, and it didn't. So, but yeah. I hear you. I've said a lot of words. I think it's going to be a close game. I think it's going to be the best game of the week.
A little PTSD, I understand. Brett, so you're on Texas?
I think the TLDR is all the indicators point toward Texas. Yeah, but Kirby Smart. if you need to sum it up in one sentence and underthink it, I think that's where I'm at. So no, I don't have anything.
I think we have a stronger take though on the next conference championship game. 2 more to go. Let's get to the ACC. SMU, a 2-point favorite against Clemson, total of 59.5. Similar to the rushing conversation we just had, Clemson 10th highest rushing success rate, led by Phil Maffa across college football, FBS. Defensively ranking 28th in rushing success rate, allowed also plus 14 in turnover margin, but they are susceptible to explosive carries. Defensively ranking 127th in yards per successful rush allowed at 11.6 yards per attempt. Brett, you said you have a bet on this game. What is it?
On the ACC? No, I have a bet on the next one. I do have a strong stance, though, and it's more a stance against the team. First of all, this line is flipped from SMU opened a 1.5-point dog. It also was bet up through 55 points, which in college football, I believe, is the most frequently occurring point total. So that is worth noticing. I mean, you're talking about 3.5% versus 2.8, but hey, whatever. Look, Clemson in the ACC championship game under Dabo Swinney, they are 8-1 outright. Their only loss came the first time in there in 2009, and since the program has become the program that it is, they've won 8 straight, and they're 6-1 against the spread in the last 7. That is definitely worth noting. However, let's take a look at how Clemson has done this year against when they play good defensive fronts. So when I say good defensive fronts, I mean Georgia, Louisville, and South Carolina. They scored 3, they scored 21, and then they scored 14, respectively. They played 4 top 60 points per drive defenses this year. They are 1-3 outright in those games, and SMU ranks 9th. And SMU has a really, really good defensive front. I know that people have talked about all year, well, look at SMU's strength of schedule. Look at SMU's strength of schedule. Guys, look at Clemson's strength of schedule in the ACC. 2 of their final 3 ACC foes finished the season with winning records. That's great. But before then, their foes combined for 11-29 final ACC records. I don't want to hear about SMU hasn't played anybody. Guys, Clemson hasn't played anybody either in terms of the ACC. SMU's has not been much better. Let's be clear. They played one top 45 opponent in terms of my numbers, and they did beat Louisville 34-27. If you're an SMU backer, you do have to be worried about that championship experience from Clemson, especially Dabo. But, guys, the Clemson offense just lays an egg when they play anybody with half a pulse, and SMU's more than that. The SMU's a darn good defense, and I think that the Clemson offense is really going to struggle. I know it went up through 55. That may be too many points. I could see this being a defensive stalemate between two teams. Peter Woods is coming back for Clemson, and SMU's offensive front has not played anything like them. I know people are going to take the results against Nevada from the beginning of the year and BYU and things like that, but I think they went on bye. They came back and they started scoring 1 million points and playing a lot better. Haven't lost since that BYU game. I could just see both of these offenses kind of underperforming and this total going under 55.5.
Well, just to, I guess, add on to that, I mentioned Clemson's susceptibility to allowing explosive rushing plays. SMU ranks 83rd in rushing success rate. We saw it against Louisville in Clemson losing as a close to around a double-digit home favorite in that game, and the Cardinals had their fair share of explosive rushing plays, 1 or 2 going for touchdowns. So, yeah, I like your look toward the under, and maybe it's the combination of experience and Dabo plus the defensive setup. Now, I know you brought up the point about trusting Clemson's offense, but Clemson seems like the side here to me. David, what about you?
I like SMU in this one. Dude, Clemson was not on my radar to even make this game. I mean, they've been such a non-factor all year, and I don't think they've been. I know they've kind of turned it on late, but I mean, they could not have possibly backdoored their way into the conference championship more than they did at this point. And again, playing with house money, they have the right coach, right? I've just been impressed with SMU all year long. I mean, they've been fun to watch. The stats really don't jump off the page, but they have felt explosive. They felt like a fun offense to watch. The defense has been really solid as well. I know they're getting a little bit of heat for their schedule, but they've beat everyone that's been put in front of them, and they lost a very close game to a very good BYU team, in my opinion. Right? I mean, BYU, I think they tied for first in the Big 12, and I think the Big 12 is a solid conference there too. So I think everything. It's almost like a repeat of the last game we're talking about. I think everything in my mind points to SMU, and the only thing that gives me pause is just Dabo and everything else there. But again, this is huge for SMU, right? And this is it. This is so big for their program. It's so big for their history. It's so big for them moving forward that I think they come out strong. I think they come out flying. I think Clemson's probably one of the better offenses they played this year. So I mean, in theory, the defense may struggle a bit more against them, but I'm not worried about it. I'm not worried about that team. I think 1.5 is effectively a pick 'em, right? So I love SMU. I love them up. It's not going to get to 3, but I would love them all the way to 3, honestly, because this is one of my stronger leans. As far as the total, I was kind of leaning over, but you bring in some good points for the under, so I'm going to relook at it. But I'll probably fire on the under on that because that 55 is a tricky number. You look at it, it's very easy to see how it gets there. Especially in college, you're 30-27 ban. We're there so easily, but you bring up a good point, and I again, these teams might just come out a little more conservative than usual in all these games. So I'll look at the under very seriously as well.
Brett, any final takes before we get to the Big Ten?
Yeah, I mean, if SMU loses this game, they're out of the college football playoff, even though they shouldn't be. They will be, and it's going to be unfortunate and probably set a dangerous precedent, and I don't think that should be underlooked. It's a team that if Clemson, the only way that Clemson can make the college football playoff is if they win, right? So, of course, they're like, hey, we need to win to get in, but SMU is, guys, if we lose this game, we're not leaving it to the committee. We are going to fall out. And I think they're playing with it's just a little bit different for SMU than it is for Clemson. I don't think that can be understated for the players here, especially moving up from Group of 5 to Power 5, where all they've heard this whole time is, well, you guys are a glorified Group of 5 team, especially beginning of the year. The disrespect card is no, maybe Miami can play it a little bit stronger than SMU, and maybe that's a bit, right? It's like SMU and Miami are the two teams right now, of course, both in the ACC. They're kind of like, guys, we're not receiving any sort of respect here. We need to get out there and show them what's up and show them who we are. And I do think that extra little bit of motivation can help that defense play a little bit stronger. That's just kind of where I fall there.
Yeah, and real quick, to add on there real quick, it's changed a little bit in the NIL world, right? Because money talks, but this it feels like this is one of these games, right? That like your average college football fan, your average probably high school recruit, they probably haven't watched a lot of SMU games, right? You put them on prime time, they're going against a major program, right? Like Clemson is still recent enough to feel like a powerhouse, even though they haven't been good the past few years. Like this is one of those games that can, I think, really propel a program into that next sort of stratosphere. I mean, it almost feels like that when Boise State beat Oklahoma in that Fiesta Bowl, like I'm dating myself, like a long, long, long time ago. It really set the program up for the next like decade plus, right? I mean, Boise State is, where they are. So I think to Brett's point, it means everything, and I think they do have to win this to make the playoff, right? And I think it's important, and it's the biggest game in their history. And listen, like, yeah, Clemson still has Dabo and stuff, but like there's only so many times you can like really get up for it. And like Clemson's also not like, let's be clear, neither of these teams I think are like actual real title contenders. So like, yeah, I'm sure Clemson like to win it and have an argument, or get in the playoff. And because I think they ought to get in the playoff, right? If they win this.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they get in it, but like they're not going to win it all. So it just means so much more for SMU, and it's hard to like quantify that in a point spread and picking a side, but they're going to come out so fired up, wanting to win this one, and they're the better team, and I think they overcome like the experience and the coaching, maybe coach experience factor there too.
And just to back up your claim about not many people watching them, the ratings for each ACC team did drop earlier today on Twitter, and SMU dead last.
Yeah, I mean, they've been really under the radar for a long time. I mean, what's the last time they were this like? It has to be the last time they were even close to this relevant was like pre-death penalty, right?
Pony Express, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, on to the last conference championship game. Oregon, 3.5-point favorite. That one holding steady. A little bit of juice depending on the book, but Bet365 still has a -110 out there on the Ducks and conversely on Penn State. Total of 49.5. James Franklin, we've all heard the narrative. Speaking of narratives, whether it's with Dabo or Kirby, so let's add on one more. 1-12 straight up against top 5 opponents. That's what the Ducks are. I really want to find a reason to take Penn State. Now, I'm going to ruin it for our listeners and viewers. I know both of you guys are high on the Ducks relative maybe to the money line rather than laying the spread here. But the biggest question to me is there any way Penn State could generate enough pressure against Gabriel where their secondary doesn't have to hold up? Because you look at Penn State's defense, third in SP+. They're allowing just 5 yards per dropback, but that all hinges on Abdul Carter and Penn State's defensive front and the ability to generate pressure. So Abdul Carter, 8.3% sack rate, 40.3% pressure rate. I mean, this is a dominant defensive front. If they can get after Gabriel, can they, David?
No. I mean, I'm sure they can get after him a bit. This is and it's square, it is square, square, square. But squares. Whatever. I'm square to begin with, but the squares have to win sometimes, and like sometimes like the obvious things do happen, right? And I think this is the case. I think Oregon absolutely just beats them by a good amount. Like I'm not saying I mean Penn State's solid, right? But they're not that impressive. Like they're not at the level of Oregon. I think Oregon is the best team in college football. I love Gabriel. I mean, I think I watched all his games at Oklahoma, and I always thought he was a bit underrated there. I thought like the fan base kind of like we were spoiled a bit, right? We had all these like Heisman winners and then Jalen Hurts and all of this. And all of a sudden, like Gabriel's like a step below, and all of a sudden he's not good enough. And I remember when they lost to Oregon, nobody really cared. I'm like, dude, I'm like Oklahoma's gonna be in deep, deep trouble at this point. And they were. So I love Gabriel. I think even if they get the pressure there, I think he's mature enough. I think he's a good enough quarterback where he's gonna be fine. I think Oregon's gonna like put up enough points there. And I think more importantly, I'm not sold on Penn State's offense at this point. That maybe I'm being a little harsh on it, but they've really they should have lost that Minnesota game. They should have lost that USC game. I know they played Ohio State kind of tough. But I don't think they're a good team. And like these again, I'm like I'm not a trends guy. I kind of believe these narratives about these coaches like losing to top five teams. I mean, like Day isn't getting it done against Michigan, right? And like Franklin has beat nobody in the top five. I mean, he's like completely struggled there. And like at some point, it's like, oh, variance is going to bounce back, all this, all that. Like maybe in the NFL that's the case, but in college, like these things do last. I mean, these things just some of these coaches just they can't get up for it. They get frankly out coached, and I think that's going to happen again here. So there's nothing on Penn State that makes me think that they're even worth a look. So I'm going to hammer Oregon, and I'm sure I'll be wrong with this much confidence. But I love this Oregon team, and I don't think the spread's high enough. I mean I don't know. Like I'm you guys are the experts, like I say on this, but I'm kind of surprised it's not a little higher to be honest.
Well, I'm not an expert in college football. I'm gonna leave that to Brett. But two-parter here in terms of a quick question: money line or point spread? Are you laying the big number on the money line with Oregon, or are you laying the 3.5?
3.5.
Okay, and we talk about motivation with SMU specifically. Oregon having a chance to play for the bye in the college football playoff, but they're in if they lose. So where is that level? Like when if just juxtaposed to SMU, I know apples and oranges, but you get my point.
I mean, Oregon's like championship or bust, right? And the only way you get there is getting the bye. I mean, they're focused. They want to win. There's enough motivation there too, right? I mean, like they came over to the Big Ten this year, right? Like there's all this, the Pac-12, like the Pac-12 used to get crapped on nonstop, and the Pac-12 also, like in my opinion, used to get a lot of crap. So this is their first year in. Do they want to win the Big Ten? There's enough motivation there. They want to stay the number one seed. They want to get that first round bye. They want to set themselves up on the path. They're going to come out. I mean, I get what you're getting at, but they're fired up, and I think by far they're just the much better team. And Gabriel. I mean, this is it too. I mean, he's a senior, right? I mean, this is his last go around. So I mean,
grad transfer, yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, this is it. I mean, this is it for him. This is like one of the last sort of showcases for him and all that. So I think motivation will not be an issue for these guys. But I get where you're coming from on that.
Brett, what about you?
Can I play devil's advocate to that bye week thing really quick?
Sure.
One of my good buddies in the space here, Kelly Ford, K Ford Ratings, did put out his projections for what the current field would look like. And, Oregon gets the automatic bump to the quarterfinals because they would have the bye. But they would have a 40% chance to reach the semifinals. Penn State, despite playing a first-round game, has a 63% chance to make the semifinals. That's a 23% difference per K Ford Ratings. And even if Boise State loses and you get Arizona State in that aspect, Arizona State in his numbers are about 0.6, half a point above Boise State, so that number doesn't change very much. Do you want that bye? Is there a chance that we bet on Oregon here and that they're like, we don't want? No, I don't think so either with Dan Lanning. But it is an interesting thing that like And a lot of people point out the 5th seed is actually the most advantageous spot in the entire college football playoff. That's a lot of strong assumptions about who they're playing and whatnot. But I digress.
Well, that's why Ohio State was favored to win among other reasons, but they were favored to win the college football playoff a few weeks ago because they were slotted for that 5th seed against Boise.
Well, I'll tell you what, I was looking at like a Arizona State, Boise State route to the semifinals and was pretty excited for that. I wonder why that's not happening anymore. Why aren't they playing this game, guys? Just kidding. I don't want to talk about it anymore. But James Franklin, we do have to point out his record. He's 4-16 against Ohio State and Michigan in his career. He's 3-2 in New Year's Six bowl games. He did win the 2016 Big Ten championship and also notched his one top 5 win in 2016. Now, of course, that was his first year, and Penn State had very little expectation on their shoulders. Since they've had the burden of expectation, it's been downhill since then. His biggest non-conference games, Auburn, West Virginia. I know West Virginia went 9-4 last year, but we're talking about 500 teams here. He's just not a big game coach, and I'm treating Oregon just like I am Ohio State and Michigan, mostly because they beat both of those teams and should be treated as such. Some injuries for Oregon to watch. Wide receiver Tez Johnson, he did return to the lineup, which is good, but stud defensive lineman Jordan Birch, he's still TBD. I think they expect him to play. He hasn't played in a few weeks. We'll see. So the Wisconsin game aside, I'm not exactly throwing it out, but that was Oregon's 8th consecutive Big Ten conference game. These guys were exhausted. You play that game off a bye or off of 3 games, I think it's a little bit different story there. Outside of that game, Oregon wins, and they win with ease. No doubt about it. Penn State's defense might be just a little bit overstated. They did get 3 sacks on Will Howard, but 2 of those were one-on-ones with Abdul Carter taking Donovan Jackson's lunch money, and that was one of his first ever games played at left tackle. He was a guard, guys, and they moved him out to left tackle. Of course he's going to get beat by one of the probably a first-round edge rusher in Abdul Carter. So the point is that this defense just isn't getting home like you think that they should, especially with the talent up there. And Oregon's offense line is very good. Dylan Gabriel is averaging his lowest air yards per attempt, which they're just trying to get it out to their guys in space and let them win, which is working, which means he's having a low average time to throw. They're not getting home to Gabriel, no chance. And that's not even an indictment on Penn State's talent. That's just Oregon's scheme. I mean, they're going to run it in between the tackles with Jordan James with some margin of success, because we just saw Ohio State run the 5 minutes off the end of the clock, and they knew it was coming. And that happened last year, too, against Michigan, where they knew what they were going to do and just couldn't simply stop it. So I do think this Penn State defense, talented though it may be, is a little bit overstated. I think Oregon's be able to score on them. I don't think I would go into the territory saying this is a blowout, but 31-13, 31-17. I think Oregon comfortably wins. I'm all over this Oregon minus 3.5. I'd look at minus 6.5 too, to be honest.
Okay. Well, you've talked me up. Both of you have talked me off taking Penn State. My only bet for conference championship weekend is going to be UNLV and the points. Brett, summing up your card here. What do you got?
I'm taking the points at Tulane after thinking it over. I am taking the points. I'm laying the points. I'm so sorry. Laying the points with Tulane. How about this? Tulane minus 5.5. Iowa State plus 2.5. I do lean the under in the ACC championship with Clemson and SMU. And I'm laying Oregon minus 3.5. And Louisiana minus 5.5. I know we didn't talk about it today, but I like that one too.
Okay. David, what about you?
Love Oregon.
Old spread minus 20.5.
Yeah. Nah. I mean, I'm not talking into it. So on the sides, I Oregon, Iowa State, UNLV, and then kind of Texas. I think it was, and then I actually am digging a lot of these unders all of a sudden now too. So again, I love Oregon. Leaning the under now on the Georgia Texas game, leaning the under on the what was that one, the Clemson game, and then I like Tulane there. As well. And then what was the other one we were talking about? SMU. Yeah, I love SMU. So listen, there's a lot of some chalk I'm eating. A little too many favorites for my liking, but at least I got UNLV.
Yeah, but I wouldn't call SMU
Iowa
chalky.
State.
Just with the perception around Clemson, to your guys' point.
They didn't open.
Yeah. Yeah, But I got a couple underdogs in there too, so at least I'm not coming on here just taking all the favorites, right? I host or co-host a podcast with Helmuth and Mattisau and another guy, and like we usually give Helmuth crap because he's always picking favorites, like, and he finally picked like an under in the NFL too, like, right? And every time he takes a dog, like we're like, dude, like you finally like you realize you can get on the other side of this. And all that. So I'm glad I came on here. I'm taking a few unders. I'm taking some underdogs. So even if I go like 0-8, at least like I can pretend to be smart.
Hey, hang the banner on plus EV bets. I'm with you.
Yeah.
I'm an underdog better, so I could never lay 3.5 with Oregon, but I'm at least not betting Penn State. How about that?
But see, Eli, just to be on that side of it, I've actually found a lot of success this year taking those ones that are a half point over the key number because they're trying to entice people to bet the other side because they see, oh, well, I can get the full 3.5, like or the 14, like Navy Notre Dame and Army Notre Dame, when you just lay it.
Yeah, well, you got fortunate last week with USC Notre Dame, so let's not.
The ball don't lie. They did it twice.
I'll give you that. So he is Brett Gibbons at Road to CFB on X, and David Woodley at Playmaker David on X, 4-time WSOP champ, and also founder of an unnamed company that he will announce in the near future, right?
Yeah, hopefully a couple weeks here. So yeah, we're excited.
All right, excited, man. Thanks for joining us, guys, and thanks for watching and listening to this edition of Beat the Closing Number, presented by Bet365 Sportsbook. Remember to sign up. For first-time customers, you can get $200 in bonus bets with your first $5 wager using promo code THELINES. Also, the early payout offer. If your team goes up by 17 or more points, you get an instant payout on college football straight bets and parlay selections. So for Brett, for David, and for myself, Eli Hershkovich, thanks for watching and listening to this edition of Beat the Closing Number. So long, everybody, and good luck with your championship weekend bets.